Welcome to the Human Side of Money, a show dedicated to equipping financial advisors with the skill set required to work with emotional human beings on the emotionally charged topic of money. You'll get practical tips and insights on applying behavioral finance into your practice from conversations with fellow advisors, industry consultants, and experts in the fields of behavior, psychology, communication, and more. Each episode is designed to help you enhance client outcomes and forever change the trajectory of your advisory business. Now here's your host, Brendan Frazier.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Human Side of Money. Now today we don't have a guest. Today we're bringing back the fourth edition of what is now known as the Best Of episode. The Best of 2025. Started back in 2021. Now we're to 2025. We're going to go back and recap the top insights, top ideas, top things you need to know from each episode over the course of the past year. But before we do that, just want to take a minute to pause and reflect and say this. Some of you that are listening, you've been long-time avid listeners, and you probably haven't thought about this, but you're going to appreciate this more. Some of you that may have just started listening, but August of this year, as I think back and reflect on the year, August of this year marked the 5-year anniversary of the Human Side of Money podcast, which to me is just bizarre. It's insane that it's been going on for that long, but just want to take the opportunity to pause, think about that, and say thank you. Primarily a thank you to two groups of people. Number one, those of you that are listening, the listeners. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that quite literally none of this would be doable and possible, would have never lasted for 5 years if it weren't for you guys, for listening, coming back, diving in, paying attention, telling your friends. It got to the point where there were so many listeners that we were able to go and improve the quality of the guests. Basically go to anybody we want and say in the industry and say, hey, we want you to come on the show. And so the listeners are everything. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys. So thank you. I don't take it lightly that you spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of energy devouring these episodes. They're not short. And there's nothing I enjoy more than getting a LinkedIn message or going out to a conference around the industry and having somebody come up to me and say, hey, Brendan, just want to let you know, I listen to you when I'm walking my dog in the morning. Hey, Brendan, just want to let you know that you're with me when I'm working out. And hearing those things, it's humbling and it's cool. And it just reminds me of how grateful I am for all of you guys that listen. Secondly, and probably just as importantly, I just want to give a huge shout out, a huge thanks once again, like I do every year, to the guests. This is almost entirely a guest-based show and podcast. And so if you don't have great guests, nobody wants to listen. You guys listen because of the quality of the guests that are willing to come on here and share their insights, their expertise, their wisdom with us. And as I say every time, I'll say it again, the guests are the lifeblood of the show. So thank you to all the guests who have committed their time, invested their time to be here and share their wisdom, their expertise, and their insights. So there have been 18 episodes over the course of 2025. 18 episodes that are packed with wisdom and ideas and insights. You can go back and listen to all 18. That's probably the best way to really digest and get ideas from what happened over the course of the past year. But what we want to do is go back through each one of those 18 episodes, and I'm going to pull out the main idea or main insight or main takeaway from each one of those episodes. Now, it might be something practical, something that you can take back and immediately apply in your practice tomorrow, whether it's a process to implement or a question to improve your conversations. Or sometimes I sit back, I think back on these conversations from the podcast that we've had, and some of the ideas are good, but sometimes there's just these beliefs, these ideas, or these mindsets. So they're less practical, more big picture, but there's something you just can't shape that sort of reframe the way that you look at things. So it's going to be a combination of those things. Some of them you're going to be able to go back and apply tomorrow. Others are more reframing how you think about things, changing the way we look and believe when it comes to money and financial advice. So let's get into it, starting with episode 130, which was behavioral finance ideas proven to enhance client outcomes with Dan Egan, which was a fun one because I had started learning from Dan Egan back before this podcast ever started. He was on the original ideal top guest list or preferred guest list. Finally had him on the show. Did not disappoint. It was a hard one to try to pick from, but here's what I took from him that sticks with me. He said that at Betterment, with the research that they did, found that it can actually be, during times of market volatility, it can actually be counterproductive to send a mass email to your entire client base, to everyone. He kind of said that the way he described it is that the generic don't worry email, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. It's kind of like giving chemotherapy to everyone. It's unnecessary for anybody who's healthy and unconcerned, anybody that it doesn't impact. And their data, their research showed that sending out those blast mass emails saying not to worry can actually cause some clients to become concerned and to log in and withdraw funds that they wouldn't have otherwise done because they weren't otherwise nervous. And this actually created their nerves and their anxiety. And so he said that the better approach when we have market volatility and you want to reassure people without sending the broad mass email is to target your communication specifically to nervous clients. And so I asked him, well, how do we know who nervous clients are? And he said, well, number one, you know who some of them are already. You can name them off the top of your head. You can also start getting a feel. You can ask them, hey, do you want communication when the markets are going haywire? But he also identified some traits and some types of clients that are more likely to be reactive. For example, people that log in and check their accounts frequently. Younger men tend to be more reactive. And then recent retirees who are just starting to live off their portfolio for the first time, they're generally more concerned about market movements than those that have been retired for 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. Next, episode 131 was a repeat guest. On for the second time, we had Dr. Daniel Crosby, the only other chief behavioral officer out there in the financial services industry. Dr. Crosby had just released a book not too long before this called The Soul of Wealth. So we went in and I basically just asked him a bunch of questions about it, like, hey, which one of these lessons would you tell your kids? Which one of these would your wife be most proud that you know? And we did a kind of fun spin on it. So the whole episode was packed with insights. The one that I found myself most often thinking about and even posting on social media about was his concept of time being the ultimate purchase. That research shows when given money, only 2% of people will use it to buy something that saves them time. The other 98% will go purchase material goods. But what they find is that the 2% who use their money to buy time, like things like paying for lawn care so they can spend time with their kids, those people that spend the money to buy time are often happier. And he said it like this. He said, time is the only purchase that constantly increases in value because time is constantly running out. It was just a cool reframe around the idea of time is the ultimate purchase. And that same concept is also backed up and verified in the book, Happy Money, The Science of Happier Spending. If you haven't read it, if you like this idea of using money to buy happiness, read The Soul of Wealth, read Happy Money. They're both great reads. All right, next episode, 132, was The Search for Purpose and Meaning in Retirement with Tom Pendergrast. And this was an episode or a type of episode that I wanted to start piloting and trying out this year that we had never done before, where it wasn't with an advisor, it wasn't with some sort of industry expert, it wasn't with somebody that's an expert in behavior, psychology, or communication. This was a retiree, a real life retiree who was in retirement, who had been outspoken and on the record about how retirement wasn't what he thought it was going to be, how he got to retirement and it wasn't the fulfilling life that he always envisioned. So we dove into that because he's written a lot about it. He's thought a lot about it. He's kind of made it his mission to spread that around to people. And he made the point that we tend to think that we all get to the point where we say, this isn't what I thought it was cracked up to be. He got to that point. And so we talked about, what did you do? And he said, I needed to find a way to identify my purpose in life. And he said, we tend to think that finding meaning and purpose is a matter of sitting down and going through a thought exercise or a card game to figure out, hey, what's truly important in our lives. And you could do it that way. A lot of people do it that way. But he said that what worked for him, what he would encourage people to do, is you find purpose by experimenting your way into it, by trying a lot of different things to figure out, what are the things that I enjoy doing the most? What are the things that I would do or want to do more of? What are the things that when I'm doing them, time just seems to fly by? And for him, he experimented his way into figuring those things out. So he did things like volunteering for a bakery at a local farmer's market. He would practice his cooking. He even started writing a newsletter and a blog that ended up taking off and blowing up. And that's how he actually ended up on the show, because I read his article about how retirement wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. So it was this idea that I hadn't we talk about meaning and purpose in retirement, and you're going to hear that was a theme of this year, by the way, in 2025. But I hadn't really heard anybody talk about the idea of, it's like you need to discover meaning and purpose, but there's not a lot out there. I'm like, you know what? The best way to do that is just go experiment and try things. And so if you like that thought, hold on, because we're actually coming back to it later. It was a common theme in another episode as well. But after Tom, episode 133 was creating a visual discovery meeting experience with David Armstrong. And we talked about what David did at his firm to improve and enhance their discovery meeting with the prospect before they became a client. What they decided to do is they wanted to make it more visual and interactive. And so they created an entire room in their office when people would come in for a discovery meeting, their discovery meeting room, and they made it to where there were 6 or 7 tiles of whiteboard, and each one of those tiles was labeled with a different heading. So it would be things like goals, family, assets, liabilities, cash flow, risks. And so it was this blank whiteboard, each with a heading, and they got to go through each one of them, and the client would talk through what needed to be on each one. And it's a visual and an interactive experience and a way to conduct a discovery meeting that he said led to much better conversations because the clients would see the topic up there, they'd see the empty board, and they'd be kind of encouraged and motivated to go in and start filling those things out. They also started doing it in a virtual way. They figured out a way to do the whiteboard in a virtual setting. You can listen to him talk about it again. It's episode 133. But he also said that it's not nearly as effective. It's better than not doing it, but it's not the same as being in person. So from there, we went to episode 134 with Dennis Mosley Williams on how to turn clients into raving fans by creating memorable experiences. For those of you that don't know, who haven't heard him before, he's been around for a while, and he's sort of the experience guy, the experience guru. His quote that I loved and stuck out to me, that I got sent to me 3 or 4 times afterwards, was, Brendan, I love the quote, efficiency is the executioner of experience. Efficiency is the executioner of experience. He gave the example of when you think about a hotel. A lot of hotels you go to, they've got this digital check-in option now where you can check in digitally, you get the virtual key, go straight to your room. And he said, you know what? That is a very, very efficient process for a hotel, but it doesn't create any memory. It doesn't create any connection. That's why the Ritz-Carlton doesn't let you do that. That's why they don't prioritize, they don't encourage the digital check-in, because what Ritz-Carlton likes to do is have an employee that walks you to the elevator to create a relationship on the way to your room. He also said that if you focus enough on experience, that can be your main marketing engine, should be your main marketing engine. The way he put it was this. He said, stop marketing and start mattering. He challenged everybody with this idea in the episode. And if you've done it and it worked, I want to hear about it. If you haven't, but you do it after hearing this and it works, somebody let me know. He said if it was up to him, he would take one of his staff members that's in charge of marketing. Maybe they're working on content for the website, posting content on social media. He would say, hey, for the next 30 days, you're not going to focus on marketing at all. Instead, all I want you to do is study our existing clients' lives. Learn what's going on, talk with them, follow them on social media, engage with them however you can, learn what's going on in their life, and then use that to deliver some hyper-personalized touch points, outreach, and communication. For example, he said, let's say you have a client whose child just graduated and they got their first job. Then you could send them a personal finance book and say, congratulations on so-and-so getting their first job. Here's a book I hope they enjoy to set the foundation for their financial future. Right? So it's something that's meaningful, personalized, and relevant to that stage of their life. Efficiency is the executioner of experience. So how do we create more memorable experiences? Then episode 135 comes along, and we talked about breaking money silence with Kathleen Burns Kingsbury. There we go. And the whole premise of the conversation and a lot of the work that she does is that talking about money is taboo. And part of our job, part of our role as financial advisors is to help people, especially our clients, get better and more effective about communicating around money. And there's a lot of ways to do it. We talked about a lot of different things, but she had one really specific practical idea that I love. She called them money talk challenges. She encouraged advisors to give their clients money talk challenges, which basically says in between meetings, give them a money talk challenge where you would send a couple home, for example. They leave the meeting, they go home, and you say, all right, here's what I want you to do between now and our next conversation, or here's what I want you to do in the next week. give them a question or a prompt to work from and say, I want you guys to go home and answer this question. What were the money conversations like in your household growing up? Or you'd say, in the next week, I want you guys to go home, share one of your main money concerns or fears with your spouse that you think they may not know about this week, or that they may not know is as big of a deal as you feel that it is. And so what we're doing is we're encouraging conversations around money, a typically taboo topic, by giving them concrete ways and prompts to start having conversations and improving those skills, not just when they're in the office, but when they leave, when they're home, when they're out to eat, when they're on their couch, when they're at their kitchen table. We've got to help educate and teach clients how to have better money conversations. Episode 136 was called A Process for Rewiring Financial Behavior and Identity with Danielle Howard. And I love this episode. I don't feel like it got the credit that it deserved. And I kind of know why, but I love this episode because Danielle talks about something that's extremely important when it comes to behavioral finance and the human side of money that I don't think we've ever even broached before. Something I don't think we've ever touched on before. And it's the idea of our financial identity and how our identity relates to our financial behavior, how our identity can drive and predict and determine our financial behavior for both good and bad. And so she said that oftentimes a financial plan fails, or when it fails, oftentimes it's because the client's identity conflicts with the plan's requirements, or their identity conflicts with what the plan requires that they do. The action items conflict with their identity. So for example, if the plan says to save more, but that client's identity, whether they know it or not, right? Identity is not always known top of mind, but that client's identity is that I'm a spender, then the plan, the idea to save more, is just not going to work. You can't just prescribe the behavior. You have to help them shift their identity. So for that client to be able to save, you have to shift their identity to where they aren't a spender, but they're a saver. And so she has an entire process called the fingerprints to footprints process that she'll take clients through to help rewire their identity and ultimately their behavior. She walks through it in the episode. We're obviously not going to go through the whole thing here, but here are a few ideas that she offers, or a few things that she does throughout the process to help rewire identity. Number one, that she has a very intentional meeting and conversational flow and script around how to uncover money memories that have led to scripts that are tied to their behavior, or to uncover the money memories that have created their identity that's leading to the behaviors that they're showing. Why is it that you say, I'm a spender? What are the things that have happened? What are the money memories that led to that? A second one is she actually helps clients create affirmations to rewire their identity. I am a saver, and putting it down, calling it out, writing it down, and starting to rewire their identity through affirmations. Affirmations are a widely accepted, really popular concept in the world of, we'll just call it psychology and neuroscience. It doesn't creep into our world very much. But affirmations, some of you think woo-woo when you hear affirmations. There's proven research that shows affirmations can be powerful, and she has a great way to do it in a way that's not weird. And then another thing she does that I thought was great is she likes to start meetings by focusing on wins. So intentionally going, hey, and she doesn't say this, right? But she goes, the idea is, let's start this meeting with a win. I'm going to ask you a question. What was the biggest financial win or success this week or this month? And what it does is it gets the client in a positive state of mind, gets them encouraged and motivated, because you're starting off, you're framing the meeting through a win. Then we get to episode 137, a 4-step framework to guide anxious clients through uncertain markets. So episode 37 was the lone solo episode this year before this episode. And the idea behind it is I gave a framework called the SAFE framework, SAFE, that you can use anytime we're in volatile markets, uncertain markets. You've got anxious clients. We're always wondering, okay, how do I handle these conversations? And the tendency in those moments, when you get a client that's nervous, you get a client that's anxious, the tendency is to try to match their emotion with logic, right? They're fearful, they're nervous, they're calling you because they've gotten to the point where they go, hey, I can't handle the anxiety anymore. I need to call. I need to talk to somebody to help get me through this. And in that moment, our tendency, natural tendency, it's not bad. It's just important to know that that's the reality, is our tendency is to try to match that fear, that emotion of fear, with logic by saying, hey, we've been here before. The market always bounces back. Don't miss the 10 best days. If you miss the 10 best days, look what it does to your wealth long term. Look at this chart that shows why you need to stay invested. Those things are good and helpful and powerful when presented at the right time. And most of us do it at the wrong time. Starting with that is not the right time. So the S in the SAFE framework, SAFE, is seek first to understand, absorb with empathy. The next is A, anchor to their why. Anchor to their why goes, instead of getting tied up and emotional about what's going on in the market, let's rechannel that emotion to why they even invested in the first place. Let's zoom out of this fear that's gripping our minds right now and say, hey, let's not be worried about what's going on today. Let's zoom out and remember why we even invested for the long term in the first place. We did this so that you'd be able to retire one day and fund your kids' education, whatever it might be. You want to anchor them back to their why. The F is facts and figures, which is when you get to bust out your charts and your graphs and all the great knowledge that you can want to beat people over the head with. It is effective, but not until they feel safe and not till they've zoomed out and understand their why. And then the last one, E, ease anxiety with action. So action can be a great antidote to anxiety. So if clients are still nervous, they're worried, they need to do something, their natural reaction or the natural action they want to take is to sell. We want to try to replace that need for action with something that's action-oriented and helpful. You want to give them something to do that's not detrimental, but helpful. And so it could be, okay, if that's the case, why don't we look at putting more money into the market? Or if that's the case, why don't we look at use now as a time to rebalance our portfolio? Or, hey, the market's down. Why don't we just take another look at the Roth conversions that we were thinking about? Or the market's down. We don't want to mess with that, but let's take this as an opportunity to review your insurance planning, your estate planning. There's more ways that I list in that episode in the article that I wrote, but the idea is to help ease anxiety with action. We don't want the action to be detrimental. We can give them actions that are actually helpful and productive. Which then takes us to episode 138, How to Communicate the Intangible Value of Financial Planning with Michael LaCour. And what he talks about is, in a world where we provide an intangible service, if we're going to effectively communicate the value of what we do, we have to first understand what the actual value is. He calls it the job to be done. It's the job to be done framework. So in order to communicate your value, you have to know what job you're serving, what emotional job you're accomplishing for your clients. So he explains it like this. This is my favorite, we'll call it analogy from this year. As soon as I went back to this episode, I said I know exactly what I need to be sharing from this one. He talks about, or he shared with us in the episode, in the conversation, that McDonald's went back, they started looking at their numbers, and they noticed something strange. They noticed that they had a spike in milkshake sales in the mornings. So the same way you just heard that and thought, why did they have a spike in milkshake sales in the morning? McDonald's looked at it and thought the same thing. They said, why are people buying milkshakes in the morning? What they found out was that people weren't buying milkshakes because they wanted the taste in the morning. You had a spike in sales because people were buying milkshakes to make their commute less boring. They needed something exciting to look forward to. They weren't buying it for the taste. They were buying it to provide a distraction for a boring commute. The job of the milkshake was not to nourish or provide taste. It was to distract. And so what we learned from that is we want to know, what is the actual emotional job that we're doing for our clients? So when a client says that they want to retire, our job that we need to do is not to build them a financial plan. I mean, it is. That's part of the job. It's not the actual job that needs to be done. The job is to help them feel less stressed and be present with their grandkids. And it's once you can understand the emotional job to be done that you can better articulate the value you provide and the service you provide and how you help clients not just retire, but feel less stressed to be more present with their grandkids. If you want to communicate intangible value, you have to understand the emotional job that's being done. Episode 139 was so good. The conversation was so good. It blended into part 2, which is episode 140. Episode 139 and 140 was called The Human Side of Retirement with Dan Haylett. Dan's done a lot of amazing work. He has a podcast. He's written a book on helping clients with prepare for the emotional aspect of retirement. The quote that he used, and he uses it a lot, but a quote he used on the podcast that I loved was, we need to stop trying to optimize retirement and start humanizing it. And I think I'm going to say this without having thoroughly thought through it, but I still feel pretty confident. He has one of the best systems or processes that can be repeated over time that I've ever seen to help clients prepare for the emotional side of retirement. He's got this workbook that he takes them through. And in this episode, part of the reason it took so long is he walks us through what's inside this workbook, which is essentially a breakdown of his process to help clients prepare for the emotional side of retirement. He goes through these exercises and how he conducts them and how he tells stories of clients and how it's benefited them. Here's two of them that always pop back up into my mind. Number one is he has this one exercise in there that he takes clients through to help them get intentional and clear on not just what they're retiring to, but what they're retiring from. And what it does is it gives a list of lifestyle and money motivators. And it says, hey, what is it that you're maybe getting from your job? What is it that your job's providing you right now? Both in terms of lifestyle, but also in terms of money. And then it'll say, once you retire, what are some of the things that you'll need in retirement? And so effectively, it's hard to explain this verbally, but here's ultimately what it does. The example he gave is people sit there and they'll say, hey, what is my job providing me now? And under the lifestyle part, one of the things they'll check is they'll say it's providing me some social connection and relationships. Prior to that, all they're thinking about is, I want to retire. I want to get out of this. I just want to be free with my time. But they don't always think about the fact that they're getting social connection from their job. This exercise highlights the gap for them. It gets them to go, I have social connection. If I were to retire, I may not have that. So then Dan can start having a conversation with these clients to say, that's something that you have. We know it's important. It's something that you're not going to have as much of when you retire. Let's start building a plan for how to provide that in retirement. I think it's brilliant. You get people to say, this is what I'm getting now. We know I'm going to need it, but I'm not going to have it necessarily. And then it becomes really clear for Dan and for the client what conversation they need to have to help them better prepare for the emotional aspect of retirement. The other thing that he mentioned, we talk about at the end of the episode, is the skill of spending, and how most clients have saved or spent 30 to 40 years mastering the skill of saving. And then we ask them to all of a sudden start spending. And that's a huge psychological burden to get over. So he has this idea, he mentioned, this thing that he uses with his clients. He calls it the first 3 months challenge. And he does it to try to jumpstart their spending skill when they get in retirement. So he tells them he wants them to make a significant purchase immediately upon retirement, a big purchase, $5,000, $10,000, sometimes $20,000, because he wants them to start flexing the spending muscle. And when they spend a big chunk, make a big purchase right out of the gate, what it also will show them is that taking out a large sum doesn't blow up the plan. It's one thing to model it and say, hey, if you were to take out money, look, it's not that big of a deal. The effect's not that big. It's another thing to have somebody actually do it and go spend it and then rerun the plan and go, hey, look, even though you just spent that, like you literally just spent it, look, it didn't even impact your plan. Now, obviously, there's some clients who, if they spend a large amount of money, it will impact their plan. This is mainly for those who you say, hey, you've got enough money, we need to get you to spend more. Because spending is a skill just as much as saving is. Episode 141, I got a text about this one shortly after it aired from a long time listener who said that was the best episode in the history of the show. It was called The Power of Storytelling, How to Craft Stories That Convert Prospects into Clients with Stacey Havener. If you're not familiar with Stacey, she's also a great LinkedIn follow. She was an amazing guest. It's a great episode. You should go listen to it. That was another one where I had a really hard time trying to pick out like one or two things to share. But here's the one that I kept coming back to. When you're meeting with a prospect, you're at a first meeting with a prospective client. If you're if you're pitching data first, data and information or why you're so great and all your experience and credentials, what you're doing is you're aiming your message directly at their brain. And the brain rejects that message because the heart hasn't given it permission yet, because the heart's the gatekeeper. We need to connect emotionally, not logically. The heart's the gatekeeper that says, once you hit me here emotionally, then the brain's ready to accept logic, data, and information. And so she goes on to mention that the best, most proven way to bypass this logical defense mechanism to get to the heart and to be able to connect is through a compelling story, specifically a backstory. A backstory meaning here's how I got to where I am. Here's the journey that I went through, the hardship that I went through, the struggle I went through. Here's why I do what I do. If you have a compelling backstory, what it allows you to do is connect emotionally rather than focusing on your resume and your credentials and what you do. People connect more with your story than they do your services. And so she not only walks through, she provides a couple good frameworks for how to build, develop, and craft your backstory. Obviously, too much for this recap. So if you're interested in that, go back and listen to it again. It's episode 141. But she actually does a live on-the-spot coaching session with me to help me craft my own backstory. So not only do you get the blueprint for how to craft a compelling backstory, you get to hear her actually coach me through it and the things that I needed to tweak and change and improve. It was fun for me. I think it's helpful. So if you want to better connect right out of the gate, you need a good story. If you want to know how to tell the story, go check out that episode, because then we went to episode 142, transforming your onboarding process into a referral engine with Libby Greiwe. I think most advisors, if we're honest with ourselves, if I came to you and I said, you just onboarded a client, have you asked for a referral yet? Most of us would say, no, I haven't. It doesn't feel right to do that. I just got them on board. I want to make sure I show my value first. I want to make sure that I justify that I'm really worth it. It just feels weird to think about asking for referrals right out of the gate. But what Libby said is from what she pointed to some research that shows that the first 100 days of a client experience are instrumental, not only to client retention, but they're also the time when clients are the most excited and the most likely to refer. At the same time, it's in that first 100 days where they're most likely to experience a little bit of buyer's remorse, a little bit of anxiety going, that was a big purchase. I hope that was worth it. I hope it's as great as it seems like. And so what you want to do is design this onboarding process in the first 100 days that not only validates their excitement and their decision to work with you, but it creates a remarkable experience that improves client retention, but it's one that they want to tell their friends about. And I mentioned this in the conversation with her because I told her, I was like, hey, it feels a little bit awkward to try to do this right out of the gate. Like, I feel like I need to earn the right to ask for a referral. As we're talking about it, it hit me that one of the programs that I went through back in 2021, expensive program, I've actually talked about it on here a number of times before for those of you that are avid listeners, a lot of money, big commitment. The very first thing I got from them was this packet. And in the packet, it started off by saying, hey, you've just made a great life change. It didn't say it exactly like that, right? But they affirmed and validated my excitement and my decision right out of the gate. Because I mean, to me, it was like, man, that's a lot of money. I hope this is worth it. So they validated it right out of the gate. But what I also remembered was it was in the first, I don't know if it was 100 days, but it was when I first started that I was most passionate about it, and telling as many people as I could about it. I was like, have you ever heard of this? Have you checked this out? And letting them know, hey, if you want to build a brand online, if you want to create content and build out programs, like, you got to check this out. And even though it's just as effective today as it was then, I'm not as passionate about telling people about it. It was this real life aha moment that, I was most passionate when I first started. The other thing that she does as we talk about onboarding is she goes through the 3 different phases of onboarding with some specific ideas for how to actually provide a remarkable experience. One of the ideas is having what she calls a paperwork party, where you bring the clients in, they come in, everybody gets together, and you sign the paperwork together in person and celebrate them joining the firm. She's got a bunch of other ideas for what to do in that first 100 days. So go check that out if you want to transform your onboarding process to get more referrals. Episode 143, why every retirement plan needs purpose before portfolios, with Tony Hickson. Tony's an advisor who at one point only focused on the numbers, financial side of retirement. And then he tells a story about how he lost his mom because there wasn't a focus on the emotional side. Tells this great story. He mentions that what he's found since then, what he's written about, and in his research, he saw a stat that said 89% of clients are emotionally unprepared for retirement. And so what Tony did was he wanted to start helping his clients and prospects and as many people as he can be prepared for the emotional side of retirement, but he's not doing it himself. He's using a workshop format to do it. So they do these retirement workshops for the emotional side of retirement. And he'll bring in somebody that's considered to be a life coach, somebody that they work with, to take their clients through a workshop to help them design and map out a life of meaning, purpose, and identity so that they fulfill the emotional aspect of retirement. And so he'll explain why he outsources it, why he doesn't do it himself. He talks through how he even mentions it to clients, how he introduces it to them, how he gets them to go, how he gets them to show up. And it's a way to say, I think life planning is important and I want to incorporate it, even if I'm not going to do it myself. I know there's a lot of people out there that go, I do believe it's important, but I can't imagine myself ever trying to help somebody figure out the purpose of their life and how they're going to spend their time in retirement. I do think that as an industry, that's becoming more and more common, but I also get there's some people that are hesitant to go there with their clients. They don't see that as their job. But if you don't see it as your job, but you know it's important, you can still add the service into what you're doing, which is exactly what Tony did. And he talks through how he does it, how he structured it, and how he takes his clients through that experience. Episode 144 was with Dr. Megan McCoy, who's done a ton of great research, so it was hard to figure out what to talk with her about. But we ended up settling on how to stay connected and deepen trust between client meetings. So her research shows that trust, commitment, and satisfaction are significantly influenced by what happens and occurs between meetings. I'll say that again. What happens between meetings with your clients, the communication between meetings, has a huge impact or is significantly influences, there we go, trust, commitment, and satisfaction. So while your actual meetings, whether in person or virtual, while they're the anchor, they're the foundation of communication in the relationship, we need to be intentional about developing a communication strategy outside or between meetings to foster trust, commitment, and satisfaction. Because what it does is it helps maintain a connection to the client between meetings, but it also signals to them that they're not forgotten, that you're still there, you're thinking about them, and you're taking care of them. And so one way to do that are these broad mass market communication. I don't know if mass market's the right term. It's the term that popped up that I know it gets used sometimes. Let's call it these broad generic emails, like market updates. A broad strategy like that is still good. It's still effective, but we don't want to just rely on generic communication. In fact, you want to, and when it comes to in between or intermeeting communication, you want to prioritize personalized communication as much as possible. Now, there's a balance there between personalization and efficiency. I know we already said that efficiency is the executioner of experience, right? But realistically, if you're running a business, you have to think about efficiency to some degree. And so you probably can't afford to call 200 clients every month. But there are ways to think about how do I do personalized communication at scale to enhance trust, satisfaction, and commitment with my clients between meetings. It's not just done in the meeting. So she gives a couple ideas. She gives a lot of ideas here. I'm going to pull out two for you. Number one is sending videos, like a Loom video in between meetings. And maybe it's a market update, a real quick market update, but you started off with a personalized introduction. She offers that idea as a way to be personal, but also efficient. But it could even be something as simple as, and I think this sounds, by the way, before I get into it, this is something that I feel like everybody knows. It sounds basic and elementary. What I've learned over the past few days is that it's not widely accepted standard practice, even though it's not a groundbreaking idea and it's pretty easy. And that is a birthday call or a birthday message of some sort, where you're not sending just out. I think we've all gotten on your birthday, you go check your email, and it's like your dentist sends you this generic email that obviously everybody gets the same one on their birthday. It's not that. It's a personalized birthday message. So one of my favorite ideas I've heard about for birthday messages, you can call. Calls are great. People are busy on their birthday. They get lots of calls. You can send a text. Awesome. A lot of people get text messages on their birthday. My favorite thing that I've ever gotten on my birthday is one of my good friends who sent me a 1-minute video. It wasn't a text, wasn't a call, just a video. I open up and it's him telling me happy birthday. It can be something as easy and simple as that, but just doing something on their birthday when it means something to them. Personalized but efficient communication to build trust, commitment, and satisfaction, which takes us to episode 145, how one retiree experimented his way to a fulfilling retirement with Fritz Gilbert. So I say we're going to come back to this idea of experimenting again, right? It was the idea of a fulfilling retirement and preparing for the emotional side of retirement was a common theme in 2025. Within that, this idea of experimentation I don't know why. I don't know how. It just sort of took on a life of its own. There was also a book released this year, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, it's right behind me, called Tiny Experiments. Probably a coincidence, but here's how Fritz Gilbert put it. So Fritz wrote about retirement and the mechanical, technical, money aspect of retirement for years and years and years, and built up this well-known blog on retirement. And then he retired and everything changed. And he said he created what he calls the 90-10 rule. He said the 90-10 rule is when you're planning for retirement, 90% of the focus is on finances and 10% on life. And then you retire. And once you reach a steady state in retirement, that ratio flips. All of a sudden, you're spending 90% of your time thinking about life and purpose and meaning, and only about 10% thinking about money. And so he suggests when you have somebody that's 6 to 12 months out from retirement, that you stop running retirement calculations, or maybe you do it, but you do it basic just to kind of confirm, hey, you're still on track. Assuming the numbers are solid, by the way, if they're on track. And you start shifting to non-financial topics. Let them know about the 90-10 rule, and let them know that it's time to start preparing for the 90% of life that's not about money. Because you know from working with other clients that it's going to be, if they're about to retire, it's not going to be long before all the focus shifts to life and there's less focus on money. So you get out ahead of it and help them deal with it instead of them running into it on their own and realizing, oh shoot, I should have thought about this before. You're preempting it. You're having that conversation with them because you know that it's helpful and you know that it's going to happen. He also made a really good and helpful and important point that I think it's important for all advisors to hear. He said, I just want to let you guys know that you need to understand clients are rarely going to tell you that they're unhappy or that they're bored in retirement because they don't see you as the person that's responsible for helping them live a better life in retirement. Number one, they see you as the money guy. So that's number one, that's important. And number two, they know you work with a lot of people that are retired, that are going to retire. A lot of people like them, and people that feel this way about retirement, it's not talked about often. So they oftentimes feel like they're the only ones. They don't. And so the client who may get to retirement and go, is this all there is? Oftentimes nobody really says that out loud. They think they're the only ones. So they don't want to be the one that calls and says, hey, is this all there is? Hey, I'm not happy, because they're probably thinking to themselves, this is probably just me. I'm the weird one. I don't want to be like my advisor's my money guy. He's not going to care about this. They don't know that you do care. They don't know that you can help. They don't know that you want to help. They don't know that the future of advice is leaning more and more towards helping clients prepare for the emotional aspect of retirement. So sometimes you have to bring up the conversation. Just check in and ask how they're doing. And last thing from Fritz, I mean, he had a ton of good insight because he's lived both sides of this. When we talked about it with him personally, how he got to the point where he goes, I realized that I didn't prepare for the emotional aspect. We talked about how he would do it. How would you go back and find meaning and purpose for retirement if you could go back in time? And he mentioned, as you've already heard, the same idea that was mentioned in episode 132 with Tom Pendergrass. He said, finding your purpose, finding meaning, it's just too heavy. It's too abstract. It feels daunting to sit down and do a thought exercise to find meaning and purpose. So the way he says it is this. He goes, you don't think your way into a new life. You act your way into it. The most successful retirees practice experimenting while they're still working. So they're still working. They're 6, 12, 18 months out. They start carving out time to experiment, to figure out what are the things that I want to be doing with my time once I retire. And so he would encourage, when I said, hey, how would you encourage somebody that's about to retire to do this? He said, I would encourage them to do tiny experiments. Not big, tiny experiments. Figure out what you like, what you enjoy, what you want to be doing more of. Ask. He said one of his favorite ways to look at it was he would ask, what did I love doing as a kid? And how might I test and do more of that today? He started trying to figure out what are the things that I used to love doing that I've stopped doing that I want to make sure that I do more of. Or you can give them a goal and kind of gamify the whole situation by saying, this is your 60th year. You're going to do 60 tiny experiments this year, and get them to go out and try things, do things, and test your way, act your way, experiment your way into meaning and purpose in retirement. This is one of those ideas that stuck with me so much that it's going to be more, it's on my mind for 2026, thinking through how do we do more of this? How do we encourage more of it? How do we introduce the idea? I'm a huge believer in it the more I've thought about it and seen it and talked to Fritz and Tom. And so there's going to be more coming on that for those of you that are interested. Episode 146, From IQ to EQ, a process for delivering values-based advice with Shannon Harris. I would say Shannon has spent more time invested more time and money than anybody I know to develop a way to do values-based planning at scale, because she has a team. She doesn't do it all on her own. She had to figure out, how do we do values-based planning at scale? She's such a believer in values-based planning. She wants to do it, but how do they do it in a systematic and scalable way? So she walks us through that. It's the bulk of the episode. So we can't go through exactly how she does it, but here are some of the things you can take away as practical ideas. Number one, the exercise she uses to take clients through and figure out what their top 5 values are. It's a values card exercise through Think to Perform. It's online. We put a link to it in the show notes, but it's the Think to Perform values card. It's an online exercise. She has clients go through that. They identify their top 5 values, and she'll use it in a number of ways here. And I guess it's hard to pick out exactly what to share. I'm sharing with you 2 ways that I heard her use it where I thought, okay, that's different. I don't think we've ever heard of that before on the show. So one of those ways was she'll use it with a client who's hesitant to spend money, a client who has enough money, but you can't get them to spend. Like we said earlier, spending's a skill. And so what she'll do is they've already identified what their top 5 values are. And so instead of sitting down and showing them another Monte Carlo simulation to say, hey, look at this. If we spend this, guess what? It doesn't change your probability of success. It doesn't change your outcome for your money. She'll sit them down, not even pull out the Monte Carlo, forget the logic. And she'll say, look, when you did this, when we first talked, you said health is your number 1 value. Yet when we talk about hiring a housekeeper to relieve some of that pain in your back, you're unwilling to do it. What I want you to think of is you're not spending money, you're not wasting money, but if you have a housekeeper, that's an investment in your health. Something like that. She obviously articulated it way better than that. But what it does is you're not telling the person to spend more money. You're not logically trying to convince them to spend more. You're showing them, you said this is important to me. You've identified this as being one of your most important things. Here is a way to use your money to do that. So it just kind of holds them accountable and highlights for them the gap between what they said they wanted to do and what they're actually doing, which is a much more effective way to change behavior than telling somebody what to do. The other one that I thought was really fascinating, by the way, was she actually keeps track of and stores the top values across her entire client base. So when they do this exercise, they identify their values. She'll track and store the top 5, or I guess the top 10 for her entire client base. And she uses that as a guide to determine the type of events that they want to put on. So for example, as she mentioned, security is one of the top values for their client base. So instead of a wine tasting, they would probably host a workshop on identity theft. I mean, I guess that doesn't mean they're not going to do a wine tasting. Maybe another value correlates with that, but you get the point. And here's another example. She said, if family is a top value, what they're not going to do is host a high-end dinner for all their top clients. They're instead going to prioritize a family night at a baseball game or a football game or at some type of event where you get the whole family there together. She's letting the values, the things that are most important to her clients, guide the type of events that they're putting on. I thought it was a fantastic idea. All right, episode 147. We got 3 left. Episode 147, how to win clients and build plans using a human-first approach with Tim Maurer, a repeat guest, second-time guest. Tim Maurer is the one that said that personal finance is more personal than it is finance. He has what he described or called the magic phrase. And the magic phrase is when you get to that point in the conversation with a prospective client, somebody that you want to work with, where you've identified they're a good fit, you've identified you can help them, they've told you about where they're at, their pain that they're experiencing, the problem they have, and you go, I can help them with that. I just need to get them to see how we do it. I need to get them to see that we're the people to help, and here's how we would help them. So instead of just launching into a pitch, you use the magic phrase. The magic phrase is the question, would it be helpful if? Would it be helpful if I shared with you how we've helped other people who have been stressed about retirement get to the point where they're on track to retire when they want? And what was funny was that Stacey Havener, episode 141, she actually mentioned she didn't call it the magic phrase, but when I said, hey, how do I just launch into my story about myself and why I got into the business? It feels awkward. She said, well, you use this phrase because when you use the phrase, you get permission. You say, would it be helpful if I shared with you why I even got into this business to begin with? It's a powerful phrase used in all phases of life, by the way. I've written it down. I've used it many times in many different conversations. The magic phrase is, would it be helpful if? Here's another thing that, just like in episode 136 of Danielle Howard, that's important, but we've never really spent a lot of time on. And maybe it's been touched on, maybe it's been addressed briefly in some way, but something that we've never really spent a lot of time, but probably should spend more time on, is this belief out there that emotions are bad when it comes to money. Like the idea, the belief is we should not have emotions with money, that emotions are bad. If you have emotions around money, it's going to lead to bad financial decisions. And what Tim mentions, what he and I talk quite a bit about, is we need to make it a point to try to stop separating our clients from their emotions. We need to make a point to stop treating it like a bad thing. First of all, the main reason is because it's biologically impossible, because we are biologically built and wired to have emotions. Trying to shut them down as an exercise in futility. Instead, what we need to do is shift the way we look at it and look at emotions as a good thing. How can we harness and channel the emotions in a good way? Because if you have emotion, you can actually use that as the client's resolve. I don't know why I said that so weird. As the client's resolve, there we go. Sounds a little bit better. And inspiration, rather than something that's going to just blow up and derail their plan. When somebody is motivated to do something, when they have emotion and they're motivated to do something, they're more likely to stick to it. They're more likely to stick to the plan. They're more likely to follow through and adhere to the action plan and do the things that you recommended that they do. We don't want to try to suppress emotion. We want to embrace it and channel it to the client's benefit. Episode 148 was called The Dark Side of Financial Freedom That No One Prepares You For, with Rick Forster. This was yet another branch out episode, doing something different, doing something new. This was an actual person, not an advisor, not an expert, a real life human being, a potential client, if you will, but not a retiree this time. Rick was, by all accounts, financially free at age 38. He was part of an event where he inherited a ton of money from the business or a company that he was a part of. He was financially free. He thought that was the dream. What he said is he quickly realized, he thought that's all he wanted. He was like, I've finally made it. And he goes, what I realized is that more money doesn't free you. It transfers you to a better cell. Like, you're still in prison. It doesn't free you. It transfers you to a better cell. You may have nicer things, but you have the same anxieties, which I got goosebumps as he sat there and said that. I was like, man, that is good. It's what people need to hear. And he said, for most people, for somebody, when they hit their number, they're financially free. We all think that that's what we want. But he said, I would caution them or urge them. I think it came, actually, now I think back on it, I think it came from the question. I said, okay, let's imagine somebody is you 5 years ago, and you think that the ultimate goal is this, hitting this nest egg, hitting this number. If you can just get this, then you'll be financially free. What would you tell them? And he said, I would urge them to not rush into the next thing, because that's what he was doing. He was like, as soon as I did it, I thought I was going to move on to the next thing, build the next thing. He said, I would say, pause, don't fill your time, don't fill that void with more. Take 3 to 6 months and just be bored and do nothing and see what comes of that. See what life tells you. See what you want to do. Don't rush into something just because that's what you always thought you would do. Pause and figure out what it is that you really want to do. And he had maybe the quote of the year on the podcast. I mean, there's a lot of good ones. I probably shouldn't say that. But a nominee for quote of the year on the podcast, he said, and I don't know if it's his quote or if he got it from somewhere, either way, if life is long, what's the rush? If life is short, why are you wasting it? If life is long, what's the rush? If life is short, why are you wasting it? Last one, episode 149, Turning Financial Plans into Purpose-Driven Lives with Emily Rassam. I posted on LinkedIn yesterday as I was preparing for this episode. Some of you may have seen it, and said, as I went back and did this, I was thinking back through, looking through, going into all the episodes, but I went through this one and I went, man, Emily killed it. There are so many great ideas and ways to apply the human side in your practice, your process, and your conversations. It almost feels like a disservice to try to summarize it in like 3 bullet points here. Or actually, I guess she wins the award. She got 5 bullet points here. So you should go listen to it. Probably the most impressive human side process that we've had on the show. All right, but what does she do? Okay, here are a few things to take away. If you're like, all right, Brendan, I'm going to go back and listen to it. Give me a little teaser, a little appetizer. She has what she calls the unlimited funds question. side note, I'm a little bit biased because I also highly endorse and loved this question. The unlimited funds question is, if you have $50 million in the bank, taxes paid, what would you do? And then you don't just listen to the answers, by the way. You listen to them. You take what they say, you input them into your financial planning software, even if they remain unfunded, even if you don't do them. These are the big picture things that people want to do and accomplish. You put it in there so that they sort of have an idea parking lot, a vision parking lot of the things that you want to do. But what it does is it releases money constraints. It says, hey, if money was no issue, money is no constraint, what's important to you? It gets at the heart of what's really important to people right away. Another thing she does, it's another great exercise she has clients go through. She gives them this wheel of life assessment. If you're not familiar with it, it's really hard to kind of explain it audibly. The wheel of life is basically where you go through, it's a wheel. I guess I'm going to try to do it anyways. There's a wheel with 10 categories, and it's like the 10 most important categories in life. And you score yourself 1 through 10 on how you're doing in each one of those categories. So she'll have clients go through and do that assessment. And if they score low in an area, for example, let's say that health is an area that's on there. They score a 3. They said that stuck out to them and that's important. She'll ask this as a lover of questions. I just can't get over how good these questions are. She'll ask this question. She'll say, if you had $5,000 cash right now that you had to spend on health to get it from a 3 to go up, maybe it's a 5, maybe it's a 7, maybe it's 10. If you had to spend it in that area, how would you spend it? And it gets them to really start thinking through and prioritizing what they need to do to improve that area of their life. And then you can, even if they don't have $5,000, there's almost always ways you can find to dedicate or devote resources, even especially money, to get the 3 to become a 4 or a 5 or a 6 or a 7 on the way to a 10. Last thing from Emily is a question that she'll ask again. Shocker, right? Just another great question. She didn't just give great questions, by the way. We talked quite a bit in the conversation about workflows and the workflows that she's implemented to do the human side, which is why I think I liked it so much. It was very human and technical combined. But another question that she asked is, she said that before every review meeting that she has with a longtime client, she starts the conversation, the meeting, with this question, intentionally to frame the meeting, by the way. But she starts it with this question: is the purpose of money in your life still blank? Whatever they've told her in the past, whatever they've identified in the past through their statement of financial purpose, she starts the conversation to anchor it in that. And she goes, hey, I just want to make sure, is the purpose of money in your life still? And not only is it great to connect on that, but it's also important because the clients generally don't sit around and think, hey, is the purpose of money still this? Is that accurate? They need to create the space to come in and think through, does this still hit? Is this still right? Is this still relevant to us? So she'll start every review meeting that way. I just think that's a great way to get the meeting off on the right foot, to set the tone for a great meeting. So there you go. There you have it. The best of the best from 2025. That puts a wrap on 2025. By the way, let me mention this real quick. If you're here because you like this idea of wrapping it up, and you're like, hey, I can't necessarily go back and listen to all the episodes, just give me the highlights, give me the top ideas and strategies. We're doing that in the podcast. I've also just released an article that goes through the top podcast episodes from the year. So we rank the top 5. It'll also give you the top 3 articles that I wrote this year. So I write an article every month. It's a deep dive into the human side of advice and how to apply it in your practice, your process, and your conversation. So it goes through each one of those. You'll get the top 3 articles. And then we're also giving away or highlighting the top 4 resources that we created for advisors that they can use to build their business in 2026. We created a handful of them throughout the year, and they were in most of the newsletters and articles that I wrote. But we're putting them in one place saying, hey, these are the most downloaded resources. I think there's 4 of them. It's also going to be in an article. That article is linked in the show notes. So if you want not just the best, a recap of the best from the podcast this year, but you want the top articles and you want the top resources, go to the show notes. It'll take you to the webpage of the article where we consolidate all that into one place. It's also the best of 2025. So without further ado, again, thank you for listening. Huge thank you to the guests, the lifeblood of the show. Thank you for contributing, investing your time and your insights and your wisdom. And if nothing else, always remember, plans and pie charts don't change lives. People do.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of the guest. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. The commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by the guest or RFG Advisory or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change anytime without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. The guest and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.